The story of the fall of the Oba is not just the tale of a king's downfall. It is the unraveling of a dynasty, the destruction of a sacred order, and one of the most brutal collisions between African sovereignty and European empire. At the heart of this story lies Benin City, capital of the Kingdom of Benin, where for centuries the Oba ruled with divine authority. To his people, the Oba was more than a monarch. He was the link between the living and the ancestral realm, the earthly embodiment of order, fertility, and destiny. His palace was not just a royal residence, but the center of the kingdom's universe, adorned with walls, shrines, and treasures that told the story of a civilization both proud and unbroken. For generations, Benin had resisted the full weight of European domination. Traders had come, Portuguese, Dutch, and later the English. They marveled at the grandeur of the city, its wide streets, its organized guilds, and the immense palace complex. They traded for ivory, pepper, and other goods. But they also carried back stories, whispers of the Oba's immense authority and the kingdom's wealth. And with those stories came something darker, the European hunger for conquest, empire, and absolute control. By the 19th century, Britain had emerged as the dominant power along the West African coast. The so-called scramble for Africa was in full force, and European powers were carving up the continent with little regard for its people. Nigeria, rich in palm oil and resources, was a prize Britain intended to keep. Yet the Kingdom of Benin remained a stubborn obstacle. Its rulers refused to open their markets freely, resisted foreign interference, and insisted on sovereignty. To the British, this defiance was intolerable. To the Oba and his chiefs, it was the sacred duty of a kingdom not to bow to outsiders. Inevitably, these two worlds collided. The year 1897 marked the breaking point. The Oba of Benin at the time, Ovonramwen Nogbaisi, had tried to balance diplomacy with resistance. But tensions escalated when British officials attempted to force open trade during a sacred festival. The Oba's chiefs, fiercely protective of their customs, warned that entry into the city during such a time would bring disaster. The warnings were ignored. A British delegation marched toward Benin City only to be ambushed. Most of its members were killed. News of the deaths spread rapidly, and Britain seized upon the event as the justification it had long awaited. The response was swift, ruthless, and merciless. A massive force was assembled, hundreds of soldiers, equipped with modern rifles, artillery, and the terrifying new Maxim gun. They called it the Punitive Expedition. The name itself was telling. This was not a mission of negotiation or peace. It was punishment, annihilation, and conquest. When the British column advanced on Benin City in February 1897, it carried with it the full weight of an empire determined to erase a proud kingdom. The defenders of Benin fought valiantly. Warriors armed with spears, bows, and a few muskets faced the most advanced military technology of the age. But courage could not stand against machine guns. The British forces overwhelmed villages on their march, burning and destroying as they went. The violence was indiscriminate. Civilians fled, homes were torched, and shrines desecrated. The invasion was not only about defeating an enemy, but about sending a message to all West Africa. Defy the empire, and this is your fate. When the British reached Benin City, they unleashed devastation. The great palace of the Oba, adorned with centuries of bronze plaques, ivory carvings, and sacred regalia, was looted and set ablaze. Treasures that had taken generations to create were ripped from walls and shrines, stuffed into crates, and shipped overseas. The air was thick with smoke, the city reduced to ashes. The Oba, realizing the fate of his people, fled into the countryside. His dynasty had not fallen by internal weakness, but by foreign firepower. Captured weeks later, Oba Ovonramwen Nogbaisi was paraded in humiliation. Once the sacred ruler of a kingdom, he was now a prisoner in his own land. In 1897, he was exiled to Calabar, far from the soil of his ancestors, where he lived out the remainder of his days in sorrow and defeat. With his exile, centuries of royal continuity were severed. The sacred bond between king, people, and gods was broken, not by natural decline, but by calculated imperial violence. The British, in their records, described the expedition as a success. They boasted of opening trade, of bringing civilization, of punishing what they called savagery. Yet their words could not erase the truth that an ancient dynasty had been shattered, a king dethroned, and a people robbed of their cultural heart. The Oba's fall was not a natural consequence of history, but a wound inflicted by conquest. But the story does not end in exile and ashes. Though the Oba died far from his city, the spirit of the dynasty endured. His descendants, though stripped of power, remained symbols of cultural identity. The people of Benin never forgot the palace that once stood, the bronzes that once adorned their shrines, the king who was once their sacred bridge. The dynasty would, in time, be restored, though never with the full authority it once commanded. Today, the Oba of Benin still exists, a custodian of tradition and memory, carrying forward the flame lit centuries ago. For the world, the fall of the Oba stands as a cautionary tale. It shows how empire does not merely redraw maps, it destroys lives, erases cultures, and severs sacred bonds. For Benin, it is a wound that has never fully healed. Every plaque in a foreign museum, every bronze mask behind glass is a reminder of what was taken, of the king who was dethroned, of the dynasty forced into exile. And yet the story is also one of survival. The Oba's line was bent, but not broken. The people's memory was scarred, but not erased. In the echoes of Benin City's ruins, one can still hear the voice of the Oba, a voice of dignity and defiance, calling across history. The British may have destroyed a dynasty, but they could not extinguish its spirit. And so the Oba's fall, though tragic, remains a symbol not only of loss, but of resilience. The dynasty lives on, and with it the hope that one day the treasures looted in fire will return to the soil from which they were born, restoring to Benin not just its art, but a piece of its soul.